Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Phil.
We're the hosts of Science Fiction 101.
It's a show which gets to the heart of science fiction. Books, films, TV. We've covered Star Trek,
Doctor Who,
Star Wars.
We love to explore the past, present, and future of science fiction.
And we'd love for you to join us
on Science Fiction 101.
Hi, Colin.
Hi, Phil.
We're recording this in April 2025, and today we're going to look at the animated film which had the nerve to beat Wallace and Gromit to the Oscar. And that film is called Flow. But first, a few words from our listeners who sent us comments via Facebook and Blue Sky. Actually, the two comments come from the same person, but they're multilingual. We heard from our friend Emmanuel, who said, "Très belle discussion, comme d'habitude." So thank you for that, Emmanuel. And he also said, "I agree with Colin. Apple TV leads the field for science fiction right now." So there you go. I can't really comment because I don't have Apple TV, but I do know that many of the good shows that we read about are on Apple TV, and I get annoyed because I can't see them. But you must have Apple TV, Colin, to know what's on there.
I do. Why did I originally get that? It was for... it wasn't for Foundation. It was for something else. And I've just kept it going, and I haven't really regretted it. Between the science fiction content and the other random things that tend to come up, like Slow Horses, the adaptation is really good.
Okay, yeah. Again, that's another one I've heard of, but obviously I haven't seen. I mean, I have ways and means of watching some of these shows, but it's not as easy as just pressing a button, which is what I would prefer.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about Flow. Colin, you tipped me off to this film. I mean, I'd heard of it because it had won the Oscar, but then you told me you'd seen it, and we decided that we should discuss it on the show. So, how did you find Flow when you first viewed it? And did you view it because you knew that it was up for an Oscar, or was it for some other reason?
No, this would have been late November, early December. And I'm guessing I caught wind of it on File 770. You know, it's a great news site where they mentioned this up-and-coming little science fiction movie from Latvia, mainly all made by one person.
Yes.
Zilba Lotus. And he's the writer, director, co-producer, and the score composer for this movie.
Yeah.
He has made lots of art movies over his career, pretty much exclusively working all by himself. And one thing that's particularly of note is it's made with the open source software Blender. So, you know, low cost, low barrier to entry, lots of free tools that are available. But there are always questions when you use open source software if it's going to measure up to things that are made commercially. But yeah, I think based on the results, you could say that it's more about the warrior than the weapon.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So we can talk about the technical side, we can talk about the story, we can talk about characters, all sorts of things, really. I've seen it only on a TV screen, a fairly big TV screen, but still only on a TV screen. I did have the opportunity to see it in a cinema because at the time of recording, it is in cinemas in the UK, and I could have seen it at 11:25 this morning. But I was a bit worried as to who goes to the cinema at 11:25, and I figure it's probably people with very young children, you know, and they're just taking them to keep them occupied. So I didn't fancy seeing a film in such circumstances. So instead, I watched it at home on a large TV with just stereo sound. How did you view the film?
We ended up going down to the Fox Tower in Portland, Oregon, and seeing it there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was short run, and the Fox Tower does tend to run artistic movies that are limited release, but it was delightful. You know, on the surface, it does seem like a kid's movie because it's an animated movie about a cat, a dog, a secretary bird, a capybara, and a lemur.
Yeah.
But it's also got, you know, I think based on the design and the themes, purported themes, interpreted themes in the movie.
Yeah.
It's actually made for all ages.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Would you like to have a go at doing a plot summary?
We're looking at a post-apocalyptic world that is ravaged by climate change. And the problem of the world is that it is flooding. flooding really badly. And we observe this through a cat. Now, to the best of my knowledge, there haven't been a lot of non-anthropomorphic animal science fiction or fantasy made in a while. If you track Disney movies, this will remind you a lot of Incredible Journey, which is
Yes.
adapted from the book of the same name.
Yep.
But yeah, we observe this world through those animals' eyes, and it starts off with the cat, and the cat is our main character. It's kind of hanging out, doing a cat thing, sleeping in an abandoned house that is surrounded by statues of a cat, which appeals to a cat's hubris and pride. And the water starts rising and flooding. And eventually, it ends up climbing the highest statue that's visible in the scene, which is a statue of a cat that is probably 250 to 300 feet tall. And eventually jumps into a rowboat, because even that statue is being covered in water, and begins to travel through this ocean, having various adventures, picking up other animals. So we pick up a golden retriever, we pick up a secretary bird, we pick up a lemur. Every one of these animals represents different parts of human failures. And the challenge of the movie is for them to all work together and survive.
Yes, very good. One of the reasons why it's hard to summarize the plot is because none of these characters have names, because there's no talking in the movie. So I don't know what the cat is called. Do you?
No, the cat, the dog. Not to be confused with that dog and the other dogs.
But of course, we come to know them as characters and as individual animals.
Yeah, in fact, that was one of the challenges that Gintz said that this movie had, because there was no dialogue, that all of the communication of emotion and attention is done through facial expressions and body posture. And they spent a lot of time studying their own pets and watching lots of cat videos on YouTube to try and get the postures and the effects that they wanted to do.
Yeah. And I noticed as the film was playing various things that you will recognise if you've ever spent any time with a cat or a dog. So there's things like the way the cat cleans itself is very accurately shown in the film. It coughs up a fur ball at some point. What else does it do? There's a scene where it stretches itself and the dog sort of copies what the cat's doing. And all of those movements, they all look very realistic. So the film is incredibly naturalistic in the way that the characters move and behave. As you say, there's not much that's anthropomorphic about it, with the possible exception of the lemur, because the lemur has this thing about gathering stuff and putting it in a basket and keeping it to itself, which now maybe that is a thing that lemurs do in real life, but if it is, I've never noticed that. So that seemed a bit anthropomorphic to me.
Yeah, I think the anthropomorphism in the movie, as little as it exists, has to do with the fact that these animals all tend to have various human failings.
Yes,
the cat is extremely independent and is not used to working or living with other people. And the dog is just kind of a happy-go-lucky guy who ends up falling in with the wrong crowd of other dogs. And then has to learn that at some point you have to come and do the right thing, even if your friends take off chasing rabbits, which is fun.
Yes.
Yeah. And the lemur, I think, actually has a couple of failings. One is materialism.
Yeah.
And the other one, which is, I think, shown at the very, very end in a very subtle way, is an over-attraction to social media.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there is a mirror, which is a prop, which is used all through the movie. The animals fight over it. The lemur, it takes it from the rest of the group. And then is staring at itself in the mirror almost obsessively, up to and including the point where the mirror breaks. And at the end of the movie, when land is restored, that lemur and a bunch of other lemurs are all just sitting on a chair, all staring into the broken mirror, looking at their broken reflections.
Yes, yeah.
The first time I almost thought, they were enraptured by media. But because of the reflection, I think it's more of a social media.
Yeah. It's a narcissism reference, isn't it?
Yeah.
The constantly looking at itself in the mirror. There's a really nice scene, actually, where the boat with our characters on comes alongside another boat which has other lemurs on, and they're all wearing little crowns or things that they've put on their heads.
Yes.
And our lemur goes and gets the mirror and lets them see themselves in the mirror. That's a really nice little scene, which doesn't really do anything to advance the story, but it really helps with the sort of the emotional feel of it and also the subtext of what the film is really about. Is it science fiction, though? In your introduction, your summary of it, you said it's a science fiction film. You said it's post-apocalyptic.
Let me make a quick aside here. So, because there is no dialogue and there is no narration, while on the surface this might look like a kid's movie, I think it's a wonderful chance for people to watch it and talk together about it, just like we're doing. Because everything I'm saying, that's my interpretation of the movie. And you might share it. You might not. You might differ. You might think that I'm kind of right, but not all the way there, or completely off base. And that is the magic of a film like this. And the most funny thing about this is in general, I don't like movies like this. But because it's science fiction-y, which I'll get back to, and it's a cat movie, that falls right in my wheelhouse and works for me. So why do I think this is science fiction? One is the huge flood that happens.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened, most of the animals that we see are completely regular old animals, except for one animal, which is a whale. And I've in my head, I've called it a turbo whale because it's huge. It seems somewhat intelligent due to a couple of things that it does, but it has all kinds of extra fins and flippers and protrusions that your typical whale does not have. Now, there's nothing crazy like a tentacle or an arm or a hand, but it's different. It's almost like, things have had time to change and evolve in this world, which is now slowly being dominated by water.
Yeah. I mean, it's Waterworld, isn't it, really, at some points in the film? But it's better than Waterworld.
It's won awards, for sure.
Yeah. Can I just make one little suggestion, and that is that we hold off on giving any spoilers about the very end of the film. Maybe we'll do a spoiler section in a while where we do talk about the very ending. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm getting at?
I know what you're getting at, and I'm worried that I already did that.
No, I don't think you did. But we'll dance around spoiling the ending for a while, and then we'll do a spoiler section, because there is something that I don't think should be spoiled without warning. I usually don't care about spoilers because usually we're talking about things that are like 50 years old.
True.
But this is something that's still on release now, So I think we should dance around it a bit. But yeah, I would agree with you. There's a global catastrophe here, which we cannot know the cause of because it's a non-verbal film. So all we can do is infer what the cause is. The film doesn't really go outside of the point of view of these animals. So there's no opportunity for the film to show us what caused that big flood to happen in the first place. It would appear that it's something new and that hasn't happened before because of the way the cat responds to it, the way all the other animals respond to the water rising up. They're shocked and surprised by it. Yeah. So it can't be that this is like a tide coming in and then going back out again. It is clearly some catastrophe. But is it a tsunami? Is it global flooding? We can't know for sure because the film can't tell us. But because of the nature of that catastrophe, this is science fiction. There's no question. The other big thing for me, where are the humans? There are no humans, but this is clearly a human-built world. And we see that most strikingly in the place where the cat lives at the beginning. As you say, he lives in this sort of big house where there are carvings of cats and massive sculptures. And we see a piece of cat sculpture carving in progress. And later on, we see a very large cat sculpture which has sort of scaffolding around it, as if it's a work in progress. So clearly there are human hands at work here. But where are the people? So that, again, makes it a science fictional thing, and that implies that it's post-apocalyptic. And I've no doubt that the director of the film talks about these things, but I haven't seen any of those interviews or anything, so I'm always looking for what is it in the film itself that is telling us or tipping us off to the nature of the story. But yeah, for me, it very much is science fiction. I imagine some people will see it and say, no, it's more fantasy because it doesn't explain things. But I think the lack of explanation is because it's non-verbal.
Yeah. The actions of some of the animals. So like they steer the boat, which is not
Yes,
something
they
that our
do.
animals tend to do these days. What makes it more fantastic. And there's a scene
Yeah,
toward the end involving the secretary bird
yeah.
that, seems rather fantastic.
There was a scene earlier on in the film as well, which was a bit fantastical, but I think it turned out to be a dream. So it felt to me as if the film was building us up for some more fantastical elements. And I think when we first see the animals, they're not doing these human things, are they? It's as the story progresses, the film allows itself to be just this little bit more anthropomorphic. But I think it's really sweet the way the secretary bird, which is quite a standoffish character, takes to the tiller of the boat and steers it. But then the other animals have to turn against it because they want to go and pick up some dogs that are stranded. But the secretary bird just wants to plough on. So the poor bird gets kind of outnumbered and gives up the tiller. And then I think the capybara takes over. So it's cute. It is anthropomorphic, but it's just really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, the other thing I should point out, because if you haven't seen any of the artwork for it or the trailer for it, it's CGI. It was made by the movie Blender,
Yeah.
or the program Blender. And
Yeah.
it does not attempt to be pixel perfect. The artwork has a very intentional brushed style to it. Like, you will not
Yes.
see individual strands of fur or drops of water or other things happening. So it almost makes it a little surreal in places, slightly
Yeah.
more cartoonish perhaps, but
Yeah.
beautifully drawn.
Yeah, it's in places, it even looks as if they've deliberately not finished rendering the scenes. When you're doing 3D modeling, you get to choose the level of detail in the render. You can do a quick and fast render, which just gives you a sense of what the 3D scene looks like. Or you can do a detailed render because you've now set everything exactly how you want it and you're looking for the final output. And it does look in places as if they've deliberately said, oh, well, that's enough rendering. We'll just leave it there. But I think that makes it stylized. It's naturalistic in the way the animals move.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastical in places because there are some very striking visual things that they choose to do. But it always holds back from being realistic. It's always got that kind of stylized look, which I think is really charming. But I know some people, I've seen some comments online where people have said it just looks like a load of cut scenes from a computer game stitched together.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. But the difference is that this has got a proper narrative, and it's a narrative that has substance and subtext as well. Whereas the cutscenes in a computer game tend to be setting the scene for something or just tidying up something from a scene you've just left. But here, obviously, it's much more substantial.
Did you notice the aurora borealis that shows up all the time? I
Oh my
shouldn't say
goodness.
the auroras in the sky that show up all the time, because I
Yeah.
don't know where we are exactly.
I didn't particularly notice that. No, I mean, I did notice that the sky was sort of colourful and not realistic in some regards, but I didn't think about it being an aurora. But that's interesting, because it kind of makes you wonder about this apocalypse. What has happened? All the people have gone. There's a massive flood. Even the sky has changed. If that makes it even more of a global thing rather than just a local thing that's happening.
Yeah. So since I watched it twice, I had a lot of time to think about it. All the fish that are shown are tropical fish.
Okay, yeah.
Little small colorful guys, not the larger ones, trout or bass, or you wouldn't see a
Yeah.
catfish because they're bottom feeders. But with the presence of the auroras in the sky, that means there may have been some huge magnetic disruption from the sun, from the Earth's magnetosphere. Yeah. Which I think adds to the science fiction element to it.
Yeah, it sure does. You mentioning the fish reminds me, there's a lot of fish in in this film because it's a water world. And that's another charming aspect of the cat character, is the way we see him going after the fish. Initially, he's just sort of dabbing at fish in shallow water and dragging them out and eating them. But as he goes through the film, he becomes more and more confident about being in water. And he goes on this sort of fishing expedition. He goes in there, he grabs a fish, brings it back to the boat, goes back in, grabs another fish, brings it back to the boat. And he's stacking up enough fish to feed every character, every other animal on the boat, which is wonderful. It's really good.
Yeah. So the cat's journey, learning how to work with other people, is a deliberate echo of Zilbalotis is used to working alone. And he knew that the scope of this movie was going to be larger than he could do all on his own. He would need other riggers, other directors. He's the co-composer of the score. So he had to build a team and a studio. And so his journey of learning how to work with a team creatively is mirrored by the cat's journey from being completely alone and stealing food from the dogs to being part of the team on the boat providing food, even though the dogs eat all the fish and no one else gets any.
But that's a truism, isn't it? That is in the nature of dogs to do that.
Oh, that is totally dog.
Yeah. I really love that thing of cooperation. I mean, that's a major subtext of the entire film, really, isn't it? Because there are so many opportunities for conflict in there. But the film is basically saying, when the world is falling apart, we are literally all in the same boat.
Oh my. Yeah.
It's a metaphor because these animals are in a boat, but it is saying we are all in the same boat. And cooperation is the order of the day. That then makes it really quite sad when the other animals kind of gang up against the secretary bird and he has to go off and, well, he sort of isolates himself on the boat, but then he flies away and he goes and isolates himself in this remaining building that's there, and the cat goes off to pursue him to see if he's okay. Mm-hmm. So I really like that kind of development there, that you've got the subtext of cooperation, the necessary majority rule that has to kick in at certain times, and then the kind of the emotional fallout of that. I thought all of that was really very good. And the other subtext that goes along with that is a subtext of diversity and equality. Yes, there's some squabbling amongst these animal characters, but essentially they're all different. They're all extremely different from each other. I mean, they're different species, but as characters, they are different from each other. But all of those characteristics are needed in order for the group to survive. And that makes it really very much a film for our times. I mean, I don't know how long it took to make the film. I imagine it took several years, but how amazing that it should be a timely film. Sometimes by the time a film is finished, the message that it's trying to get across is old hat, or irrelevant. But this, it just seems so much for now. I just think that works really nicely.
Yeah. The capybara is one character that I have not been able to figure out a journey for. It seems to be, kind of slow and steadfast and loyal, but it has the boat and initially, steers over to pick up the cat. But after that, I'm not really sure what's going on with it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I thought maybe he was a bit of a misfit, or he was a misunderstood character. Certainly when the cat first meets the capybara appears frightening to the cat. Mm-hmm. But very soon he realizes that no, all the capybara wants to do is say hello and then just lie there on the floor sleeping. He does various things, doesn't he? He goes into the water and kind of shows the cat that it's okay to be in water, because the cat's been in water several times, but it seems to be always a very traumatic thing for it. Up until around about the time that the capybara also falls in the water, and the cat kind of follows him and is more relaxed and more at ease. I don't know. I think that the capybara comes across as a misfit, but he seems to have his wits about him and knows what to do without anyone ever having to explain anything. And then towards the end, he's the one who needs to be rescued.
Yes. Everyone else literally abandons the boat.
Yeah.
But they all need to turn around and work as a team to try and save him.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the traditional Hollywood ending of the film. but it's not the real ending of the film. I mean, it's an ending, but it's not the point at which the film finishes. So shall we go into spoiler mode and start talking about the multiple endings of the film?
Multiple endings?
Yeah. Did you not notice?
Well, okay, let's talk about the ending of the film that happens before the credits.
Okay, so this is a big spoiler. Yeah.
Oh, and then maybe you can tell me the one you're talking about, because I don't think I've actually seen that.
Ah, okay. The big spoiler ending is the water, having flooded the world, recedes, and we get the land back, and the cat is able to go back home and sort of see things more or less how they used to be. It looks like everything is back to normal, except the whale.
Yeah, so the giant whale is stranded there on the land, and the cat, I think, hears or smells something and goes running off from his friends and goes to sit next to the whale, presumably as it's dying.
Yeah, yeah. So it's quite a sad scene. I mean, we don't actually see that it's died, but it's kind of inevitable because it's a very long way from water. There's no way that they can ever get it back to the water. So that's I think the true emotional ending of the film. So to me, that's ending number 2. Ending number 1 is rescuing the capybara because the waters recede. The boat gets stuck halfway up a tree. Mm-hmm. All the water's gone now, and the boat is just there, up in the air. So they have to figure a way of getting everyone off the boat, and then the tree starts to fall. So they have to get the capybara out. So that's ending number 1. And to me, that's the sort of the traditional, the Hollywood ending, time for some heroics. And it's the cat that does the heroic stuff at that point. So that's ending number 1. Then the real ending is with the whale. So that's ending number 2.
I've heard there was a cutscene involving the whale. It's a whale, I don't know if it's our whale or not, in the water swimming away.
Yes, that's at the very end of the film. Did you see that at the very end, after the titles?
No. No, so in the theater, I was checking to see, is there a cutscene for Flo? And it was new enough that nobody knew. So my wife and I left. And I just forgot to watch it when I rented it from Amazon to watch it the other day to get it, a recent rewatch, have it fresh in my mind.
Yeah. So it's just after the end credits, and I think it's about 5 seconds long, maybe 10 seconds, and it does show a whale in the ocean with no land visible. So maybe it's been tacked on as a happy ending to say, oh, don't worry, we got the whale back out to sea again. But that seems very unlikely given what's happened in the movie so far. So I think if it was originally intended to be there after the end credits, I hope that it's there to kind of remind us of the glory days of the whale, because it was in its element when the world was flooded. The whale could go anywhere, but then the water goes away and it's beached, totally beached and landlocked, shall we say. So to me, that's a final farewell to the whale that we remember. There is another end scene, which I wouldn't call the ending of the story particularly, and that's our group of animals gathers by a small pool of water, and they look down and they see their reflections. All except the lemur, who doesn't look at the reflections, he looks up at them as they're looking down at their reflections. And I thought that was a nice bookend to the film, because if I remember rightly, the opening shot of the film is the cat on its own, looking down into water and being a bit fearful of water. But by the end of the film, the cat is no longer a solitary creature. It's now part of a family. Mm-hmm. They're looking down into the water as a group, and they're looking at each other. And the lemur is looking up at them as if to say, reflections are no longer so important to me now. It's you lot. That's you're my family, kind of thing. So that, emotionally, I thought that was a really nice little scene at the end.
Yeah. From everybody having their own individual problems to being able to work together and having recovered somewhat from those.
Yeah. And they've all learned a bit, I think, along the way, but they're still very much animals. The cat is still a cat. The dog is still a dog.
Yeah.
Did you have a favourite character or a favourite scene in the film?
I think so. I love the cat, and I'm a cat person, so that's not a huge surprise. My favorite scene, though, I think, is actually with the secretary bird.
Yeah.
So the animals, four of the animals, end up going to an island, and they're running around on there, and they end up falling down into a nesting area for a bunch of secretary birds, and the flock is really upset, and they're going to punish the cat for being there. And a secretary bird gets up and stands up in front of the other ones and kind of says, "No, you can't do that," by presence.
Yeah.
And because he has stood up against the flock, they hold him down and they break his wing. And so he joins our animals, our other animals, for a large portion of the journey.
Yeah.
But it's that standing up to people who are going to do the wrong thing that I really like.
Yeah. That is really very powerful. And what makes it kind of heartbreaking is you see those other birds flying off. That firstly, the leader takes off, the alpha male takes off, and then the rest of the flock follow suit. And then our secretary bird tries to follow suit as well, but because he's got the broken wing, he can't actually keep up with them. And he lands on the ground and he just cries out to them. It's kind of, "Hey, come back and get me, don't forget me," but they've gone. And so it's another quite heartbreaking moment there. But what happens to the secretary bird in the end? Because that's where we have this kind of surreal sequence, which might be a dream sequence, but doesn't seem to be a dream sequence.
No. So the secretary bird, ends up steering the boat for quite a while, and I think he's directing them to a certain place. And that certain place is a large set of. The island reminds me of the Star Wars movie, Star Wars 7, The Force Awakens, where Rey finds Luke at the top of this great big cylindrical island with stairs cut in a ascending spiral all the way up it. The bird flies to the top, but the cat has to run all the way up to the top. And then the bird just ascends into the sky, into this portal that kind of shows up in the aurora, and the cat floats up with it for a while, but then ascends back to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think's going on there? I mean, is it going to heaven? I wasn't entirely sure what was happening.
That part, I don't know. There hasn't been a lot of talk about it that I can find online.
Yeah. Because that character, the bird, had kind of isolated himself and then gone to this special place on his own. And of course, not told anyone because there's no talking. It's a non-verbal film. And the cat pursues him out of, well, I suppose curiosity, but also out of friendship. I've got to go and see what's up with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bird goes off to this sort of elevated place in the sky. It almost, to me, it felt either suicidal, that the bird had had enough, or that this was the appointed place, the heaven that all of these birds head to. But because the film can't explain itself, you're left wondering over that, which is fine. It's not a criticism at all, but it's the most surreal part of the film, I think.
Do you think that the bird ascending into the sky ends up being the cause of the water receding?
My goodness.
The only reason I mention it is because they happen very close in time to one another in the movie.
Wow. Yeah, they do. They do. I'd have to watch it again. It's not a thought that had ever occurred to me, but I like it. Well, I hope anyone listening to this gets the impression that we kind of like this movie.
Yeah. I like the movie. You like the movie. The people at Cannes, they like the movie. It got an award. I think I think the English version is A Certain Regard.
Mm-hmm.
It has 47 award nominations. It won 29 of them. At Rotten Tomatoes, it's 97% fresh. It cost 3.5 million euros to make, and the U.S. box office alone was $36 million.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it has won, let me check this out. It has won the Golden Globe and the Academy Awards for Best Animated Feature. It was the 2024 Annie Award for Best Writing. I'm almost positive that it's also up for a Hugo this year.
I hope so. Yeah, that'd be good.
I can check that out real quick. Where are my book? Hugo finalists. Yeah. So in the middle of Dune, Furiosa, Wicked, and The Wild Robot, it's Flow.
Excellent. If I were voting in the Hugos, it would get my vote. Definitely.
Yeah, I nominated it. So I'm happy about that.
Oh, did you? That's why it's in there. It's because of your nomination.
Well, me and a whole bunch of other people.
Anything else you want to say about the film?
It's really enjoyable. If you can knock out a couple of hours to watch it, I think it's worth your time to do. It might not be exactly your thing, but I would encourage you to do the thing that Phil and I have been doing, listeners, and that is look at the themes, look at the character development, look at the plot, and bring your own loves and dislikes to it and see what you can get out of it.
I would also say if anyone is a bit uncomfortable watching a non-verbal film, feel free to kind of talk about it while you're watching it. I mean, I usually, when I've got a classroom full of students and I'm showing a film, I prefer people to remain silent when the film is on, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. But with something like this, it really lends itself to being discussed while it's on, because you're not going to miss any dialogue. And it's nice to be able to interpret what these animals are doing, because whether it be the lemur picking up a spoon, you might think to yourself, why is he so fascinated with that spoon? And it's probably because it's reflective. It's a bit like the mirror, There's a wonderful scene near the beginning where the cat has been chased by the dogs. The cat manages to step aside and they go running off into the distance, not realizing that they've missed the cat. And then, after a couple of beats, they come hurtling back. And as they go past the cat this time, they turn and look at him, but they don't stop. They're not interested in the cat. Why are they not interested in the cat? Because there's a stampede of deer coming through. Why is there a stampede of deer? There's a flood coming. And all of this, you can kind of talk your way through the film, and I think you'd get a lot from it. So my preference would be to watch it in silence, but if people want to talk through it, it's a really good film for doing that, I think. But I have an ultimate question, Colin.
Yes?
Is Flo better than Wallace and Gromit?
I had a similar question like that asked of me because I recently saw The Wild Robot. So again, you have an animated movie that is computer rendered by a major studio, adapted from a book that I'm going to be covering in a podcast within a few weeks.
Okay.
And somebody asked me, I think it was Tim, if I liked Flo or The Wild Robot better. And, Flo is beautiful and wonderful, but The Wild Robot has all these parental beats to it that just talk right to my heart. So I think I can say whether I like one or the other better, but so how does that compare to Wallace and Gromit? Wow.
It's apples and oranges, isn't it? I mean, they're so very different. The only thing they have in common is that they're animated, and they were both shortlisted for the Best Animation Oscar. But I remember seeing comments from people online saying, oh, how could any film be better than Wallace and Gromit? And I had to withhold judgment because I hadn't seen Flo at that point. But now I've seen it. That's how a film can be better than Wallace and Gromit. It's totally different. It's not trying to do the same things. It's a totally different form of entertainment. But whereas Wallace and Gromit is doing something familiar supremely well, I think what Flo is doing something that is largely unfamiliar. There's enough points of familiarity in there that you can lock onto it and enjoy it. But it's also doing some things that are very different to sort of traditional Hollywood storytelling. And one of the few pieces of behind-the-scenes information that I saw was that the film was made without any storyboards. And in other words, the director was using Blender itself to lay out the story of the film. Whereas normally you get somebody to draw everything first, and then you go and build your scenes in Blender or equivalent software. But apparently this was done without storyboards. So what we see on the screen really is the direct result of the visualization, which I think makes it look and feel very different to the way, say, Pixar would have done it, or the way Disney would have done it.
Or even how a conventional movie was made.
Yeah. That's right.
One of the things Zubel Lotus talked about was the freedom that working with Blender and a 3D environment in general gave him, in that once they had all the assets in place for doing pre-visualization, he could play with camera angles and pacing and all kinds of things that you cannot do in the real world on a practical budget.
Yeah.
So, should I shoot this from the left? Should I shoot this from the right? Should I pan with the character? Should I pan, zoom in or zoom out? And he said he found things that he doesn't think he would have found otherwise doing that.
Right. Yeah. I did notice there was one sequence which possibly was repeated, but from a completely different camera angle. And that's where we see the cat climb up into its house at the beginning of the film. Later on, we see the cat basically do those same maneuvers again, but this time he's being watched by the dog. So we see it from a different angle in order that the dog is included. And it occurred to me that possibly, I don't know if they did this, but it's possible that that was the same scene twice. But because it's rendered from a different camera position, it gives you a totally different point of view. But yeah, the whole technical side of the film, I think, is fascinating. And I must see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, which evidently you've seen, but I haven't.
Oh, yeah, they're all over YouTube. Interviews and featurettes and analyses, and yeah.
Great.
Very interesting.
Shall we do a quiz?
I am ready for a quiz.
Are you ready for a cat quiz?
Oh, yes, I am ready for a cat quiz.
So, inspired by Flow, I've put together some questions about cats that have some sort of science fictional element to them, or science element. So we'll start with question 1. There's a cat in a box, and it may be either dead or alive, and there's no way that we can tell whether it's dead or alive. So question 1 is, which real-life scientist came up with that thought experiment?
That would be Mr. Schrödinger.
It was, correct. Question 2 is about flat cats. Flat cats are a species of non-sapient Martian animal described in a science fiction novel called The Rolling Stones. Which author came up with The Rolling Stones?
I know this. I came across this recently, even. Flat cats. Is it Heinlein?
It is, correct. Yes. Question 3. Which humorous science fiction and fantasy writer said, and I quote, "In ancient times, cats were worshipped as gods. They have not forgotten this."
Oh.
So who said that?
Was it Mr. Pratchett?
It was, correct.
That was a total guess.
Oh. Question 4. There is an alien race called the Kazinti who appeared in several books referred to as known space novels. And they also turned up in a Star Trek animated series episode in a garish shade of pink. Which author created the Kazinti?
Is that David Niven?
Oh, if only you'd stuck to your strategy of just using surnames.
Larry
Niven.
Yes.
Yes. If you just said Mr. Niven, you would have been spot on there.
Oh. All right.
But I'll give you half a point because you got half the name.
Oh, thank you.
Question 5. He's a ship's cat. He's a ginger American shorthair. And his name is Jonesy. Which film is he in?
He's an alien.
He is, correct. Question 6. We've already talked about this. The Incredible Journey was a 1963 live-action Disney film which starred 2 dogs and a cat. The cat's name was Tao, T-A-O. What breed of cat was he?
Siamese.
Correct. Question 7. Here's a quote for you. "Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat? It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life." In Alice in Wonderland, what kind of cat was this?
That's a Cheshire cat.
It is. Cheshire, by the way, is also a cheese. So I could have included that in the cheese quiz a few episodes ago.
Now, that one I might have gotten because that does not sound like a roadside... What did you call it? It's not a truck stop, but it's...
Motorway services.
Motorway services, yes.
And here's the final question, question 8. The 2023 novel Starter Villain has a cover showing a cat wearing a business suit with the caption, "Meet the new boss." Who wrote Starter Villain?
That would be John Scalzi.
Correct. You did very well there. I think you got 7.5 out of 8.
Hey.
Very good indeed. Time for past, present, and future, I think.
Yes.
What do you have?
I have a present item. The OMSI Science Fiction Film Festival is happening right now.
Oh my goodness, is it really a year since the last one?
It has been. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a little reduced in scope this year. It only runs for 5 weeks, but it's showing 31 different films ranging in years from 1951 to 2024.
So are you planning on going to any particular screenings?
Oh, Tim and I have been seeing quite a few movies. I think my favorite, The Wild Robot was just incredible. And I loved Star Trek VI, seeing it on the big screen again. Because it was like, it's pretty much the last real original series movie crew.
Yeah.
So and they kind of talk about it being the last roundup because they're all going to retire. But we're about halfway through it, and there are many, many movies left to see. And we've seen all kinds of things, from animation to, we saw Interstellar on the big screen, which was fantastic. We saw a little independent film called The Rover, starring Robert Pattinson and Guy Pearce.
Okay, yeah.
And at some point, I'm going to need to see a movie with Guy Pearce in it that is a good quality movie.
I have a present item. If you're a Star Wars fan, you might want to check out the podcast called Script Notes. It's a podcast about screenwriting, and I listen to it religiously because it's something I'm very interested in. But they happen to have an interview at the beginning of April 2025 where they had as a guest Tony Gilroy, who is the showrunner for Andor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff in there about how he planned the series and how it turned out different to the original plan, and how the pandemic was actually helpful in getting the show into good shape. And he actually says something to the effect that if the pandemic hadn't come along, the show wouldn't be nearly as good because they would have rushed into making it. But the pandemic gave them a very useful pause, which let them refine the stories and the script and get it into good shape. So it's a very interesting episode. I'll give a link for that in the show notes.
Cool. Well, and with Andor starting up in a couple of weeks, it's very timely.
Yeah. You got any more past, present, or future?
I have 2 brief future ones, one of which may be of interest to you.
Yeah.
June 12th through 15th, the British Film Institute at their South Bank and IMAX theaters are going to show an original, unedited 1977 copy of Star Wars.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yeah. So this is as it would have been seen in cinemas on first release, with none of the CGI nonsense that George Lucas later added to the movie.
Yeah, and although I don't understand all the exact details, apparently there was also a 1981 re-release with a bunch of other fixes put in it.
Oh, right.
So it is truly the original authentic version and not any of the CGI versions.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. And the release date for Project Hail Mary has been announced. It's May 2026.
Okay. So that's been a long time coming, but yeah, hoping they do a good job on that.
Yeah, me too.
Hoping they haven't turned it into a comedy.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. Are you saying that because you've watched the Murderbot trailer that came out?
I'm saying it because I saw a headline today about the new science fiction comedy series, Murderbot. And I thought, oh my God, what have they done?
There is a lot of humor in it, but it's very dry humor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I wouldn't call it comedy.
No. So, yeah, if you have not seen the trailer, it's worth watching.
Okay. I'll take a look at that.
I think what I'm hoping they've done is taken every funny element from the series and cut it together into a trailer. Because if the entire series is like this, it will be, I think, quite different from the original work.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a present item here, or a very, very recent past item, and it's a kind of a personal connection here. One of my former students has been orbiting the Earth. Now, I thought this was an April Fool's gag when I saw this. I saw it on Facebook on the 1st of April, and it was a post from the University of Wolverhampton, and it was referring to this student who is an amazing student who's had an amazing career. And I thought the PR department of the university, who knew the student in question, decided that she'd already had a remarkable career. Let's pretend that she was also an astronaut and now commanding space missions. So I thought it was a gag. Turns out to be true. So this is my former student, Jannica Mikkelsen, who's from Norway. And she studied filmmaking with me just for a year. And then she went on to the British Film and Television School. She's an expert on 3D film and VR. And she's worked on various 3D projects with Brian May and Queen and Sir David Attenborough, and somehow she became a payload specialist for a SpaceX mission, and then on the 31st of March she was the vehicle commander for the Fram-2 mission, which was orbiting the Earth over the North and South Poles, and she was up there for days. As far as I know, she may still be up there.
Wow. Imagine what would have happened with 2 years under your tutelage.
Yes, she'd be at Alpha Centauri by now. But yeah, that's the most amazing achievement of any of my past students, I think. And it'll take some beating as well.
Yeah.
I've got a future item here as well. Speaking of Quatermass, as we were last episode, coming in May 2025 is a book by Toby Hadoke, which details the making of the original Quatermass TV series, The Quatermass Experiment. And he's done a lot of archive research, and apparently, according to what I've read, he's been able to come up with the most detailed production history for the show ever published. And the book's called The Quatermass Experiment, The Making of TV's First Sci-Fi Classic. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And of course, as soon as I read about it, I had to place an order for that book. So I shall be receiving a copy in a few weeks.
Wonderful. Mary Robinette Kowal released her latest book, The Martian Contingency, and she started her book tour at Powell's Bookstore here in the Portland area. And so I went and met her, got an autograph, bought a book, and was so excited. I went home and started reading it. And at 1:30 in the morning, I reached page, I think it's 381.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I like her writing, and it was great.
Yeah.
A great break from the things going on in the world. Anyway, at the bottom of page 381, the sentence does not end. And so as I looked to the top of the next page to continue, I was shocked because it's the beginning of a new chapter. And then I realized the font was different from the previous page.
Uh-oh.
And as I began to look and read it, all the characters were different.
What's going on?
There was a binding mistake on some of the books that she was sent on tour with, and there were 18 pages of a different book replacing 18 pages of the actual published book, The Martian Contingency. And so it's 1:30 in the morning. I'm almost at the end of the book. I can't finish the book with the book that I have. It's not like I can go to bed and wake up and pick up where I left off the night before. So I bought the ebook and powered through and caught the end of it.
Good. So the ebook pagination was correct.
Yeah.
That's very good. On the one hand, you'd want to swap that book for a perfect copy, but if it's already been signed by the author, then it's got to be a keeper, surely.
Yeah.
I think I'm done with past, present, and futures. You got any more?
Nope, I'm tapped out.
Okay, then I think we'll draw this to a close. And I'm tempted to say goodbye in the manner of the animals from Flow and just say meow. Woof. What does the capybara say? He just sort of grunts, doesn't he?
Well, interestingly enough, it looked like a capybara, but that's not what capybaras sound like. They're really high and squeaky. And so they ended up using the sounds from a baby camel instead.
Oh dear. I think I take back everything I said about the film now.
It must be fantastic.
Yes, that's it. It's pure fantasy.
Thanks for listening.
We're Phil Nichols and Colin Kusky.
Our music is from Purple Planet at purpleplanet.com.
Please visit our website at 101sf.blogspot.com,
where you can support us by buying us a coffee.
And you can find us on Facebook and Blue Sky. So see you next time.